My name is Sarah Michelle Davis. I'm 42 years old and I'm a mother of 3 beautiful children. I live in Austin, Texas, where I've worked as a family counselor for over 15 years. I thought I knew every problem that American families faced, until the day I died for 25 minutes, and Jesus showed me something that will change how you see your family forever. It was September 23rd, 2024, a Monday that started like any other. I was in my counseling office, meeting with yet another broken family, parents who couldn't communicate with their teenage children anymore, a 20-year marriage falling apart, kids who were lost and confused. This was the 5th similar case just that week. You have to understand, in my 15 years as a family therapist, I've watched American families crumble at an alarming rate. What used to be isolated cases became my daily reality. Parents calling me in tears because their 12-year-old was threatening suicide. Teenagers so addicted to their phones they couldn't have a 5-minute conversation with their own mothers. Marriages ending because couples forgot how to talk to each other. After that particular session, I drove home thinking about what had become my routine: shattered families, desperate parents, angry children. I turned on the radio, trying to relax, but the news only made my anxiety worse. More school violence, teenage suicide rates hitting record highs, divorce rates up 300% in 5 years. I remember calling my husband Mike on speakerphone, talking about dinner plans. Our 3 kids were waiting at home: Emma, 16, Josh, 14, and little Lily, 8. Mike was asking about my day when suddenly, everything changed. I was driving on Highway 35, stuck in the usual 6:30 p.m. traffic, when I felt this crushing pain in my chest. It was like someone was squeezing my heart with an iron fist. "Sarah, are you okay?" Those were the last words I heard Mike say. The pain was unbearable. I managed to pull over to the shoulder before everything went black. A massive heart attack at 42 years old, with no family history of heart disease. The paramedics later told me it was the accumulated stress of years watching families destroy themselves. When they found me, my heart had already stopped for 8 minutes. At the hospital, they fought to bring me back for another 17 minutes. Total time dead, 25 minutes. But here's the thing. I wasn't dead. I was more alive than I'd ever been. Suddenly, I was floating above the ambulance, watching the paramedics working desperately on my body. I could see Mike racing through the hospital corridors. I watched my sister bringing my kids, Emma crying, Josh trying to be strong, little Lily asking why won't mommy wake up. I tried to call out to them. "I'm right here. I'm okay," but they couldn't hear me. Then I felt myself being pulled upward through what felt like a tunnel of pure light. But this wasn't just light. It was alive, warm, loving. It felt like being embraced by pure peace. All the stress, all the anxiety I'd carried for years just melted away. When I emerged from that tunnel, I was somewhere else entirely. The colors were beyond anything we have on Earth. The air itself seemed to sing with harmony. And there, waiting for me with the most radiant smile I'd ever seen, was Jesus. He wasn't like any picture I'd seen in Sunday school. Light poured from him, but somehow I could still see his face clearly. His eyes, they looked right through me, like he knew every thought I'd ever had, every family I'd tried to help, every sleepless night I'd spent worrying about the state of American families. "Sarah," he said, and his voice was like music, "I brought you here because you need to see what's really happening to families in America." Jesus reached out his hand, and when I took it, suddenly we were standing in what looked like a massive war room. But instead of maps on the walls, there were screens, thousands of them, showing American families in their homes. "What you've been seeing in your counseling practice, Sarah," Jesus said, "is just the surface. Let me show you the real battle." As we walked through this room, I could see each screen clearly. Every one showed a different American family, but they all had one thing in common: they were under attack, and they didn't even know it. Jesus pointed to the first screen. I saw a suburban home in Colorado, a typical American family. The dad was in his home office, working late again. The mom was scrolling through Facebook, feeling depressed about her life. Their teenage daughter was in her room cutting herself, while watching TikTok, and their 10-year-old son was playing violent video games until 2 a.m. But here's what shocked me. Around each family member were these dark figures, not visible to the human eye, but clear as day in the spiritual realm. These entities were whispering constantly into their ears. These are the enemy's workers, Jesus explained sadly. They have been assigned to destroy the American family, and they're succeeding beyond their wildest expectations. I watched in horror as these dark beings whispered lies. To the father, your family doesn't appreciate your hard work. You're better off alone. To the mother, you're a failure. Look how perfect everyone else's life is. To the teenage girl, nobody would miss you. You're worthless. To the little boy, violence is normal. Anger is strength. Jesus, I whispered, how is this happening? He showed me another screen. A family in Ohio. The parents had given their 8-year-old unlimited internet access to help with school. But I could see what the parents couldn't. Dark entities using that access to feed the child's mind with content designed to steal innocence, promote confusion about gender, and normalize what should horrify. The enemy found the perfect delivery system, Jesus said. Parents willingly handed their children devices that connect directly to his network of lies. Then Jesus showed me something that broke my heart. He revealed how these attacks weren't random. They were coordinated. There was an actual strategy to destroy American families. First, isolate family members from each other through individual screens and devices. Second, fill their minds with content designed to create shame, anger, confusion, and despair. Third, normalize behaviors that would have been unthinkable just 20 years ago. Fourth, convince parents that they have no authority to set boundaries. Sarah, Jesus said, what you're seeing is the systematic destruction of the family unit, because the enemy knows that strong families are the foundation of a strong nation. Destroy the family, and you destroy everything. Jesus showed me more screens. I saw families where parents were afraid to discipline their children because they'd been convinced it was toxic. I saw children as young as 10 being taught in schools to question their biological gender. I saw teenagers being prescribed powerful psychiatric drugs instead of being taught how to process normal emotions. I saw the pornography industry deliberately targeting younger and younger children, knowing that early exposure would damage their ability to form healthy relationships for life. I saw social media algorithms specifically designed to make teenagers feel inadequate and depressed. This isn't happening by accident, Jesus revealed. There's a deliberate plan to ensure that this generation of American children grows up broken, confused, and unable to form stable families of their own. The most heartbreaking part was seeing how many parents had given up their God-given authority, convinced by culture that setting boundaries was somehow harmful to their children. Then Jesus took me deeper into this vision, and I saw something that completely changed my understanding of what families are facing. Sarah, he said, most American families think they're dealing with normal teenage rebellion, communication problems, or cultural changes. They don't realize they're in the middle of a spiritual war. He showed me the spiritual realm overlaying the physical world. Over every American city, I could see what looked like thick, dark clouds. These weren't weather clouds. They were spiritual strongholds of confusion, rebellion, depression, and family destruction. These strongholds, Jesus explained, are built through agreement. Every time a parent gives up their authority, every time a family chooses screens over conversation, every time they accept what culture says instead of what my word says, these strongholds grow stronger. I watched as these dark clouds sent out what looked like spiritual missiles, targeting families below. But here's what amazed me. Some families had protective shields around them. These shields were bright, strong, and deflected every attack. What makes the difference? I asked. Jesus smiled. Families who pray together, eat meals together without devices, read my word together, and where parents take their God-given authority seriously, they're protected. The enemy can't penetrate homes where my presence is welcomed and family time is sacred. But then he showed me something that terrified me. The attacks were about to intensify dramatically. I saw a timeline stretching into the near future, and the spiritual warfare against American families was about to reach levels never seen before. Why are you showing me this? I asked. Because, Jesus said, I'm calling parents back to their roles as protectors of their families. The time for passive parenting is over. The time for hoping that culture will respect family values is over. Parents must become spiritual warriors for their households. Jesus showed me families who had learned to fight this battle. They looked different. There was peace in their homes, children who actually talked to their parents, teenagers who weren't consumed with anxiety and depression. These families had something the others didn't. They understood they were in a spiritual battle, and they fought accordingly. Prayer isn't optional anymore, Jesus revealed. Family devotions aren't old-fashioned traditions. They're weapons of spiritual warfare. Setting boundaries with technology isn't mean parenting. It's protective warfare. Teaching children biblical values isn't forcing religion. It's giving them armor for the battle they're already in. I saw parents who had taken back control of their homes, children who were thriving because they had strong boundaries, and families who were actually enjoying each other's company because they'd learned to fight for their relationships. Sarah, Jesus said, this is why you're seeing this. American families are under the greatest attack in history, but they don't have to be victims. They can fight back and win, but only if they understand what they're really fighting. But Jesus, I said, how can families fight back against something this powerful? His expression became both serious and hopeful. I'm going to show you the weapons I've given families, but most American parents have forgotten how to use them. Suddenly, we were standing in front of a different set of screens. These showed families who were winning the battle. The difference was stark and immediate. First, Jesus said, parents must reclaim their spiritual authority. I gave parents the responsibility to train up their children, but many have handed that authority to schools, peers, and culture. I watched a family in Tennessee where the father had established himself as the spiritual head of his home. Every morning, before anyone touched a device, they spent 15 minutes in family prayer. I could see spiritual light surrounding their home like a fortress wall. Second, families must create sacred spaces and times that are protected from outside influence. I saw a family in Arizona that had designated their dinner table as a device-free zone. No phones, no tablets, just conversation. What amazed me was watching their teenage children actually engaging, laughing, sharing their hearts. The dark entities I'd seen around other families couldn't get near this dinner table. Third, parents must become gatekeepers of what enters their homes. Jesus showed me a mother in Florida who had discovered what her 12-year-old was really seeing online. Instead of feeling powerless, she took complete control of the internet in her home. She installed filters, set time limits, and made internet use a privilege earned through relationship and responsibility. But won't my kids hate me? I asked, remembering the pushback I'd seen from other families. Jesus smiled sadly. Sarah, would you rather have your children temporarily angry with you or permanently damaged by what the enemy feeds them through unrestricted access? He showed me something beautiful. The same kids who initially rebelled against boundaries were now thriving. Their anxiety was gone, their relationships were healthier, and they were actually grateful for parents who loved them enough to protect them. Fourth, families must understand the power of worship and praise in their homes. I watched a family in Michigan that played worship music every morning while getting ready for school and work. The spiritual atmosphere in their home was so bright that dark entities literally fled from their property. Fifth, parents must teach their children to recognize spiritual warfare. This surprised me. Jesus showed me parents who actually explained to their age-appropriate children that there were spiritual forces trying to influence their thoughts and emotions. These children had learned to recognize when they were under attack and how to resist. Sixth, families must prioritize relationship over rules. I saw parents who had learned that connection is protection. Children who felt truly known and loved by their parents were far less susceptible to outside influence because their primary emotional needs were being met at home. Finally, Jesus said, parents must pray specifically and strategically for their children. He showed me mothers and fathers who prayed over their children's minds, emotions, friendships, and future spouses. These prayers created spiritual shields that protected their children even when they weren't physically present. But Jesus, I said, what about families who feel like it's too late? What about parents who feel like they've already lost their children to culture? His eyes filled with compassion. It's never too late, Sarah. I can restore what seems impossible to restore. But parents must be willing to fight for their families with the same intensity that the enemy fights against them. He showed me families that had been completely broken, children who had run away, teenagers addicted to drugs, marriages that seemed beyond repair. But through persistent spiritual warfare, prayer, and refusing to give up, these families were restored. As our time together was drawing to a close, Jesus' expression became more urgent. Sarah, what I'm about to show you is why this message cannot wait. Suddenly, I was seeing into the near future, and what I saw made me want to cry. The attacks on American families were about to intensify beyond anything we've seen. I saw new technologies being introduced that would make current social media addiction look mild. I saw educational curricula being implemented that would actively work to turn children against their parents' values. I saw cultural movements that would make it increasingly difficult for parents to maintain authority in their own homes. The window of opportunity for families to prepare themselves is closing rapidly. Jesus warned, parents who don't take action now will find it much harder to protect their children in the very near future. But then he showed me something that gave me hope. I saw a movement of families who had heard this warning and responded. These families became like lighthouses in the darkness. Their children grew up strong, confident, and able to stand against cultural pressure. Sarah, this is why you had to see this. American families are approaching a crossroads. They can continue down the path of cultural surrender and watch their families fragment, or they can choose to fight for their families with spiritual weapons I've provided. Jesus showed me communities where multiple families had banded together, supporting each other in this battle. Children from these families were different. They had joy instead of anxiety, purpose instead of confusion, strong relationships instead of digital addictions. The enemy wants parents to feel overwhelmed and powerless, Jesus explained. But families who understand they're in a spiritual battle and fight accordingly will not only survive, they'll thrive. He placed his hands on my shoulders. Tell them, Sarah. Tell American families that they don't have to be victims. Tell them that I've given them everything they need to protect their children and restore their relationships. But tell them that time is running out to implement these protections. I felt overwhelmed by the responsibility. Jesus, will they listen? Will they believe what I've seen? Some will, he said gently. And those who do will save their families. That's enough reason to share this message. That was 8 months ago, and our family is completely different now. We're not perfect, but we're protected. We're not isolated from culture, but we're not controlled by it either. Mike and I have learned to pray together for our children daily. We've created sacred family traditions that our kids actually look forward to. We've set boundaries with technology that initially caused some pushback, but now our children thank us for. Emma, our 16-year-old, told me last week, "Mom, my friends are all anxious and depressed all the time, but I'm not. I think it's because of how you and Dad protect our family." Josh, our 14-year-old, chose to delete social media apps on his own because he noticed how they made him feel angry and dissatisfied. And little Lily has never known a world where devices control our family time, so she naturally gravitates toward books, outdoor play, and conversation. But here's what breaks my heart. I've shared this message with hundreds of families through my counseling practice, and while some have transformed their homes, others look at me like I'm describing something impossible. If you're watching this video, it's not by accident. Jesus is trying to get your attention. Your family is under attack, whether you realize it or not. But you don't have to be a victim. Here's what I want you to do right now. First, pray and ask Jesus to show you what spiritual influences are affecting your family. Second, implement one protective boundary this week, maybe device-free meals or family prayer time. Third, have an honest conversation with your children about the spiritual battle they're facing. Fourth, take back your authority as a parent. You're not your child's friend, you're their protector. Fifth, connect with other families who understand this battle. You don't have to fight alone. American families are at a crossroads. We can continue surrendering our children to cultural influences that want to destroy them, or we can fight back with the spiritual weapons Jesus has given us. The choice is yours, but choose quickly. As Jesus showed me, time is running out. My name is Sarah Michelle Davis. I died for 25 minutes, and Jesus sent me back to warn American families about the battle they're in and how to win it. The question is, will you fight for your family?